Good morning, everybody. My name's Mandy McIntyre. I'm the program director here at Q Music and Big Sound, and this is the very beginning of our Big Sound conference. So thank you. Here we are, first session, first day. It's wonderful to have you here. So we are going to be shortly listening to a conversation with a very powerful Yorta Yorta man, Adam Briggs. And he is going to be joined shortly as well by another very powerful man, Larrakia man, Dan Rennie. So we're so excited. We've had a lot of conversation already and action around with this whole situation of Bad Apples and all of the artists and all of the people that you might know and see who have been here at Big Sound already. We hope you get to meet them, see them, experience their amazing music, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. So on behalf of everybody who organises Big Sound, we hope you have a wonderful Big Sound. We hope you are nourished by the conference, and I'll introduce you now to Dan Rennie. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy Mac. And hello, everybody. How are we doing? There's a few stragglers, a few weary-looking souls, and it's only day one. Amateurs, you got to pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Big Sound. You got to take your time and enjoy it. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet here today, and pay my respects to elders, past and present, and to mob here in the room as well. It's deadly to see you here. My name is Dan Rennie, and I do know a bit about Big Sound because I worked at Q Music for a period of time. I've been lucky to work in the music industry for nearly 2 decades. These days I've stepped away, sort of, but they keep dragging me back in. And I work as a journalist for NITV, which is how I pay the bills, but I get to do fun stuff like this as well. Now, Kobe D obviously isn't here. And it is due to family reasons, so a family emergency. So our thoughts and our prayers are with Kobe and his mob right now. So I only found out I was doing this pretty late last night, so bear with me. It might be a few hiccups and a few stumbles, but we'll get there. Well, it is an honour and a privilege to be speaking with this brother today. He's a voice that cuts through a lot of the noise, and as you heard Mandy say there, it's a powerful one. He's a hip-hop powerhouse, a writer, actor, and a tireless advocate for First Nations people and voices. He's powerful as a leader, a songman, a storyteller, and a change maker. The brother is truly one of a kind. I'm sure you will agree. The country has never needed him more than we do right now, today. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Briggs.
Yo, thank you, brother. Appreciate those words.
This is very formal. I didn't realise how quite formal. What do I call you? Adam Briggs, Senator.
Yeah, all the above. They're all legal. They're all legal. They're all legal tender. I wasn't clever enough to come up with, a fancy rap name. It was until I started calling myself Senator. And then that kind of stuck. It's still funny how many comments and that from people who are uninitiated, who are like, "Who voted for you?" I was like, "Bro, me. I voted for me."
and plenty of people here as well, I reckon you'll find. But we got to address the elephant in the room. The weekend we saw some pretty ugly scenes, and as blackfellas we've known, this place is racist. They used to hide in the shadows, used to cover their faces. Now they're out, they're loud and proud, waving their Chinese-made flaggies everywhere.
I think there's something to it to say. I think my primal and initial response is one of anger. But sorry, you got to excuse me. I did a show last night, I did a lot of yelling. So if I sound croaky, it's because I am. But yeah, my initial response is primal. You know, it's one, you see it, and you can't, as a black fella, you can't help be, you know, angered by it. These people marching, you know, for an Australia that's pining for something that's never existed. Angry at people that they don't know, that aren't here. You know, and I feel like it's, to be fair as well, it's a leadership issue. If you're not strong in your leadership and, you know, from the top down and, you know, nurturing a nation, these are the kinds of, you know, things that happen when we have, you know, subpar leadership at all levels. But, you know, because there's people there who are misinformed, who are, you know, grasping at straws, who, you know, don't have the knowledge and the capacity and get told, you know, don't be angry at me, be angry at the other guy. He's the one that's, you know, taking your lunch. But it's the top tier that aren't paying taxes, that own 78 properties or whatever, that are, you know, running these issues up. And then, you know, on the other hand, there's just some neo-Nazis. And I hate calling them that because it feels like it gives them some kind of, like, I think they get off on it. Because, you know, reality is they're just gronks. You know, we need to come up with a, you know, a better term for these gronks.
Yeah, and I think we've probably given these gronks enough oxygen. What do you reckon? It's, you know, it's something that's been deep-seated in this country's history for a very, very long time. And, that, you know, I think you hit it on the head there before with the lack of leadership and the lack of history.
Because what we're talking about there is, like, Australia's lack of identity. The history of Australia is British. All the things that they hang their hat on, from Anzac days to whatever, is British. And it's right there in the corner of their flag. Their ugly clip art flag. You know, it's not even a good one.
It's pretty basic.
Ah, bro, it's like, you just knocked that together before you got to present the flag. You know what I mean? What are we going to do? I don't know. Just like the other ones, stick that Proxy Union Jack in the corner and call it a day. And it looks like it's like made all the other stars askew and stuff. Like, you know, everyone who's done a bit of Office knows what that is. But it's a lack of identity because Australia hasn't dealt with its history, its truth. You know, we had the Uruk commissions in Victoria that, you know, had an official finding that genocide, you know, was practiced in Victoria. That's the history that they don't want to acknowledge. If you ask the average Australian at those marches, they'll tell you, you know, if you ask them what Australia's identity was or what it meant, they'll tell you, oh, it's good being a good bloke and looking after your mates. Like, they don't do that anywhere else or have that in Brazil. I've been to Brazilian barbecue. It's great. They have it, you know what I mean? Like, these things aren't unique to Australia until they acknowledge, until they wholeheartedly accept the history and reconcile with themselves that we are the culture of this place. The oldest civilization. It's us, the most unique culture you could have. Until they have that and embrace that, they're not going to have anything beyond the superficial. And that's what you're looking at. That's why they have these weak, you know, poxy little flags. They've got nothing else. I feel bad for them.
It's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. If nothing else, it's a very poor fashion choice.
But that's the thing, they get mad at people like disrespecting the flag. And then they've got like flag Speedos. It's like, you got ball sweat on your flag. How could that not be disrespectful? Like,
didn't your grandfather die for that?
Yeah. The grandfather didn't even die for that flag. You know what I mean? Up until the 80s, I was singing God Save the Queen. Like, relax, bro. They need to learn their history.
Let's get to know a bit of your history, Buzz. You know, these days you're at the forefront of Indigenous hip hop. You know, the premier hip hop artist in the country. Like, let's be real. Your voice is one that cuts through, as I said at the top there, to not just black fellas, but you speak to white fellas too, and that's a real skill to be able to get through all the other shit that's going on in the world, to speak to everyday people in this country. How have you seen that transition when you're sending out a message to black fellas and it's sinking through to mainstream?
Well, I think everything that I've always done in my career, you know, like Bad Apple's music, like as a record label, is 10 years old, and I was probably doing it 10 years before that. And I've always been nothing but unapologetically myself. And I feel like, you know, that message is amplified and resonates with people who kind of grew up like me, you know, in Shepparton, Victoria. It's a rural country town, like one of those towns they call a gateway. It's a gateway. I don't know to what, but it's definitely a gateway. So I feel like embodying that, like, my special skill was I could see what was not being said and wasn't out there, and I'd choose that lane. I'd take that lane. So, you know, there was a lot of people rapping, you know, about graffiti and whatnot in Melbourne and Adelaide and stuff, and people were doing their thing, but there wasn't anyone like from the country, rural, with that experience. And like a lot of white fellas, I got white mates, you know what I mean? Believe it or not. And I figured,
I don't believe it.
Nah, for real. But I always figured if I got like, you know, 20 white mates at home, I might have 200 around the country, you know what I mean, that believe what I'm doing and have those same kind of experiences. And because, like, I just match your energy, you know, if you meet me, like, that's what it is. And the energy I project in my songs is just that. It's the energy of a young black fella who grew up in a, you know, national liberal stronghold in a pretty, you know, classically racist town. And like, so did other fellas, you know. It was a very multicultural upbringing that I had. I had a lot of, and that's the thing, they always talk about this multiculturalism that we had of our town, but it was very separate. It was very separate. There was a lot of, you know, communities there from, you know, Tongan, Samoan, Filipino. We had everything. We had them all, you know. And like, I had a lot of friends from these cultures as well, which brings me back to the first thing, was like, man, like, you know, you're missing out if you don't get to embrace that. But I feel like cutting through is a human thing. I talk to people like, there's no, like, I'm the same on the internet as I am in person. The people at Bad Apples that work with me know that. Kelly knows that. I'm the same. I don't have the energy to be something else.
You tried to just skip over it there a second ago, but 10 years of Bad Apples, that's something to be celebrated. Hey guys, give me a round of applause.
Thanks.
And what you've been able to achieve with the next generation coming through, I mean, you've got the energy, you're doing it. You're doing you're talking the talk, you're walking the walk as well, bringing the next lot through. Tell us about how that process works. How do you identify who you want to work with, who you want to sign?
Well, when I first started Bad Apples music, it started with me and my right hand, Sam Dutch. We were just hanging out in Redfern, getting a coffee, And he said, like, why don't you start a record label? And I was like, yeah, it sounded like work. I was like, yeah. But, you know, we put the wheels in motion because, you know, for me, you know, I think this is, you know, evident on how black fellas live, you know, and other marginalised people, minorities live. It's not so much about your personal gain as it is about a community gain. It's like, I'm only doing as good as I can do as long as everyone else is doing well as well. So it's, you know, my whole approach was always like, to my own financial detriment, was who else can I put on? Who else can I bring with me, you know, like from Alice Sky to Birds, Nookie and Philly, the original lineup to the powerhouses that we have now, you know, of Kobe D and Barker. It took 10 years to get kids like that to this level. Not skill-wise, but acceptance-wise from, you know, the platform. Because if you, like, I was there, like, if you look at what was going on before Bad Apples, it was real white. There was, you know, and I was there, and I had mates there too, and other black fellas. There was Emperor Howe, you know, Trials and Bill Bunks and these guys, and like, you know, SBX crews and whatnot. But the shift from Bad Apples is evident because it changed the way that people were going to accept Indigenous music and Indigenous artists. I had so many arguments with people about, you know, swearing. The fuck? Swearing. They used to tell me like, this one guy, and he prided himself on being like a, you know, an encyclopedia of Indigenous music. And he told me that his mum couldn't listen to this. What the fuck? It's not for your mum. Your mum had the Stones. You know what I mean? Your mum had everything. This is for kids that were like me. Because the closest thing that I had to something that looked like us was, you know, Ice Cube and Snoop and Public Enemy, and I loved it. But I wanted something that was from here. I was pining for something that wasn't there. I wanted something that was from here, that looked like us, that talked like us, that had our humor, that had our slang, that, you know, lived and breathed the same way that we did. That, you know, when I talk about Nan's Kitchen, you all know what that smells like, burnt toast, you know what I mean? Or I'm having a stroke. But it was always about changing the landscape and, you know, changing what music could be for black fellas, because like they were always happier when black fellas were reminiscent and mournful, and that was the only way that they were going to accept us as a struggle, as, oh, you know, we will survive. And it's like, yeah, fucking earth will survive, and we're still here, but there's room to be audacious, there's room to be proud, there's room to tell them to go fuck themselves. There's room for all of that because, you know, we're not an homogenous group. We all have different feelings and different ideas on how we're going to tell our story because we're from so many different nations. So these stories are going to come out in different ways. And like, I never intended Bad Apples to ever be like the only one or anything like that. It was just my thing. It was like, if I seen an artist and I was like, I got an idea for them, I can help them, I know how to sell this, I can take their story, change their lives, make it something, you know, for them. Because that's all I ever do. Like, I give them ideas and I just try to encourage them to be more, you know, because like I see their potential and I run with it. But, you know, for the longest time it was me and Dutch, and we had Coco at the start, who was a manager, and then we got Kelly, who's a great help, a great hand, and looks after our artists when I don't want to. But it's the same thing. It's like we know, like the artists themselves know that they can come to us, and they're going to get a different understanding, like getting a call last minute. For instance, Kobe D has family issues, so he can't be here. We know how to deal with that. Other places struggle. Blackfellas get too hard, it's too complicated, and labels they'll drop them because it's too complicated for them. But I stepped in, and other people step in too. Everyone else is doing great work. It's not just me. So, but it just turns out that Bad Apple's music is the best at it. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you've used that platform and that powerful voice to essentially infiltrate the Australian music industry.
Well, they didn't. As I said, they only wanted Australian music. Only wanted blackfellas in a certain light, in a certain way. And it's not to say that music that come before us was not important. It was like, they did, wonders, Uncle Archie Roach and stuff. Like, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, the things that they did in that time, in that era, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But it was my point to be that it's like, we're more than one note. It's like, it was so shocking for them, for the, not just the industry, the media and whatnot, had a tough time dealing with this idea that we weren't going to be reminiscent, we weren't going to be mournful. It's like this idea that it's like that we live in the past, that we're not here right now. And it's like, my whole approach was, if I could be louder than everybody else, more brash, more audacious, give less of a fuck than anybody else, then everyone else could come through as well and, really open up those lanes and be themselves. They don't have to be like me. Like, they don't have to be out there. It's like, I'd actually advise against it. I'd advise against it. It's not all that it's cracked up to be. It's a certain type of mental illness you need to be able to do what I do.
Was anyone at the show last night? Raise your hand.
Yeah,
What's that like, screaming at a room full of people?
It's cathartic.
Yeah, cathartic. Yeah,
It's good. It's like, but again, it's, for me, like, I always wanted to make music however I wanted to make it, and this was the latest iteration of, like, I felt like, not that, like, I'm never going to be done with rap music. Like, that's my love, first love. It's like, hip-hop is my culture as well. It's like, lived and breathed it. It's brought me to this point, to where I'm at, to where I can do these things. But for me, it's about expression of creativity, and also, again, pushing those boundaries about what black artists can be. Like last night we had Homesick on the Bad Apples bill, a hardcore band, blackfellas out of Sydney. It's so important that people understand, not just kids seeing that they can be in a hardcore band, or they can be singers, or they can be whatever, but breaking that landscape open for the media and, the industry to understand. It's like, they're not just rappers, or they're not just singers and songwriters. Like, we can be everything.
It's tiring work what you do, man. I've been doing it a long time as well. A bit more smaller scale than you, but it's tiring. We're only individuals, and it's hard work being the and carrying that load for the mob. And why does that? Why do you keep doing it? Why do you keep going? Why do you keep doing everything that tells you, everything that society tells you is going to be bad for your career? It's going to be unpopular. You're advising your own artists against it.
I'm just real stubborn. Yeah, you know, like I know my parameters. It's in my DNA. You know, I'm from, my mob was Yorta Yorta mob, Wamba Wamba on my mother's side. You know, I'm from the cloth of William Cooper, Sir Doug Nichols, and my old man Paul Briggs. You know, our family are active, still active. You know, and my approach, like Bad Apples has had, it's evolving. It's evolved over time. At first, Bad Apples was about black excellence, you know. It's like we've got to be excellent. We've got to be, you know, we've got to do better and be better. And then we did it, and I was like, all right, we're excellent. And I was like, you know what, I'm fucking sick of being excellent. No one else is. Have you seen these other guys? They suck. You know, it's like we got to be excellent, and they get to be mediocre. Pah. But, you know, my artists are the best, and they're phenomenal, and they're excellent every day of the week. But there's growth, there's evolution to everything that we do. You know, opportunity evolves, and so we have to evolve as a record label, as artists, and just as members of this community. So with each step, with each era, comes different challenges, and we meet them head on. We did Black Excellence, nailed it, and then, you know, for the last little while, I've been trying to just move the needle and change the perception of, you know, the idea of blackfellas being in this Aboriginal deficit. The idea that people are helping us out by supporting us. I'm so tired of that. People who feel like it's a charitable donation to buy a ticket to a show. So changing those attitudes, you know, from, you know, the last few years to now has been, you know, on the forefront of my mind, because we're so much more than that. It's like we are, you know, active, you know, we are the ones, you know, packing out rooms and doing shows, not because people feel obliged to be there out of support, but because people like the songs. These artists are phenomenal, these artists are great. Not just because they're Aboriginal. The Aboriginal point gives them a POV, a point of view that people haven't heard yet. And, you know, people ask me all the time, say, how do we support you? You're like, what should we do? You know, I rarely do these panels and things like that because they piss me off, they shit me. Because, like, we're being studied again. It's like, come to a show, stand at the bar with other people in the room, buy a piece of merch or 5, and immerse yourself in the crowd, in the audience, like you would at fucking Oasis.
Or Coldplay. Hey, when you think about those things you spoke about before, and how all those metrics and all those measures tell you that you know that's going to fail. If you piss off the 97%, you're not going to sell records. You're not going to sell merch. How have you done it?
I think, like, with everything creative endeavor, there's always going to be the notion, you know, of failure. But with everything, it's like I've always walked the tightrope like there's no net. It's just the way that, like, if I fail, it's not so bad. Like, I'm not doing brain surgery yet. That's the next Bad Apple's brain surgery coming next year. No, but but you have to take those chances. I think the biggest obstacle is in this country, blackfellas don't get a lot of second chances. If we fuck up, it's, you know, quite often the first and last opportunity that we get to make mistakes. So again, which was part of my, you know, game plan with Bad Apple's music was to, so the guys that will come through, like everybody's got to make mistakes. They all have to run their race and learn and feel the bumps in the road. Otherwise, it's not real. However, there's mistakes that I've made and other artists have made that are detrimental, and because sometimes, like, not everyone gets to learn from their mistakes. Sometimes if people get knocked down, they don't have the capacity to get back up. So for me, it was about navigating those pitfalls and those pathways that I know, you know, I know the code to the door. Everything in my life comes back to video games because I grew up in the 90s. But I know the code to the door. So if you're waiting there, I can punch it in real quick and get you through. You know, not because it's easy, but if you don't know those codes, you're not going to get through. And I only know those codes because the Hilltop Hoods told me. You know what I mean? And so the point is like, if I can help artists navigate this industry, you know, without having to take those unnecessary knocks, then who would I be if I didn't? You know what I mean? And that's always been the approach. It's like, yep, you're gonna have to learn some hard lessons. It's just the industry for it. Hard lessons are coming. But unnecessary lessons that are avoidable, we'll get those obstacles out of the road. Because, like, that's what it's for. They've been doing it for other artists their whole careers, and you know, we've seen it.
People often ask me if I'm worried about AI taking over or the wars happening around the world. Not really. I'm worried about dying at the hands of the police in this country, or being you know, our lives cut short through you know, through the health gap. What are the biggest issues, do you think, facing First Nations communities right now?
I think health is the main one. I feel like, you know, obviously blackfellas dying at the hands of police brutality is abhorrent and terrible, but I feel like the health situation is killing us way faster and on a way bigger scale. But, you know, fuck the doctors isn't as hot as fuck the police, you know what I mean? So, but if the government and people in power were truly invested in, you know, the gaps widened, they're not hitting the metrics on that. If they were truly invested in closing the gap, you'd think, you know, within the last 10, 15 years, they would change their approach instead of this situation where, you know, certain organisations get a certain amount of money to hand out the rations. You know, they've moved this off the mission, but the mission managers, they've planted them to, you know, to hand out, and it depends who's there about, you know, which defines who's getting what. But unless they change their approach on, you know, closing the gap and the health situation, like we're still so far behind the mortality rate. You know, we're still the most susceptible to mental health and suicides. And, you know, and if the government doesn't change their approach, like, you know, you would change your approach if you're seeing that you weren't, like, you don't keep doing the same thing over and over, right? Otherwise, you know, that's the definition of insanity. However, you know, I feel like these things are, you know, this is what everybody has to deal with. Part of it is also dispelling, you know, the myth that racism exists just in the air, like it doesn't exist in a person, you know, like it affects us, it affects our health, it affects how people respond to us, it affects ourselves mentally and therefore physically. You know, racism isn't just name calling, and I know I'm pretty sure everyone in this room would understand that. But if anyone needs a soundbite, there it is. And, you know, like, that's been another big part of, you know, what we've tried to do with Bad Apple's music. And it's a thing with every time you do a black thing, it's like, I grew up in Shepparton, we have the Rumballara Football Netball Club. It's a nucleus of our people, of that area. And it's not just a football club. It's community, it's health, it's jobs, it's everything. And every time black fellas have to do something, every time you're an artist, every time, like, as Bad Apple's music, we're not just a record label, as much as I'd love to be. We have to be everything else, because at the moment, being everything else for our artists, for everybody, for the community, not just black fellas, but for white fellas too, because we are part of the prosperity of this industry. We have to be more, you know, and that burden on us to be more, it weighs heavy. It takes its toll. Luckily, we're excellent.
Yeah. We're cloud. Yeah, you have to be excellent. As you said, it's that tall poppy thing, or you're made to be an example of, and yeah, you be a good black and you do as you're told, or else you suffer the consequences. And we saw that with, many instances, but a recent one from memory was Donnell Wallen when she stood up against Fortitude Metals and Gina Reinhardt, who wasn't sponsoring the team. It was a donation, right? And she pulled her donation back real quick as soon as she said, "I don't want to wear that jersey of your father," who basically said on television, this is what he was saying in public, that to solve the black problem, we poison the water holes and make them sterile. This was on fucking television in the remember what he was doing behind the scenes. So Donnell standing up, pulled in millions of dollars of donations and said, you be a good black or you don't get my millions of dollars. Now, in what kind of world or country are people watching their netball to find out where the fuck to buy their iron ore? I mean, it's baffling to think about this woman who inherited all of this money from the land that her father, her and her business continued to pillage. And one black woman stood up and said, "No, I don't want to wear your jersey."
Yeah, I feel like there's, again, you know, there's a lot of pressure placed on sports people, on artists, and, you know, to stand up and do that. And it's great if you can. You know, it's really hard because, like, you know, for some people, man, it comes back tenfold. You know, you piss a lot of people off. I did a takedown a few years ago of the national anthem, and I made the Western Australian front page for that, you know, because there was a bunch of blackfellas that said they weren't going to stand and sing the national anthem. And I was just like, it's a shit song. Objectively, that song sucks. But I said to someone, they were like, "You should stand for it, you know, it's national anthem." It's like, do you stand for it at home? When you're in your lounge room and it's on, do you stand up then? And they're like, "No, you don't." Like, shut the fuck up. Like, there's always, with, you know, they're always going to look for leadership from that. And, like, you know, well, and like her standing up was amazing. And, like, I think, like, you know, if I was concerned about tall poppy syndrome, I wouldn't have gold teeth. You know what I mean? Like, I don't give a fuck. I really don't care. I can't stress that enough. I don't give a fuck. Everyone, you know, like, with this comes, you know, a lot of criticism from people who couldn't tie my laces. And that's fine. That's okay. Because I do it for them too, at the end of the day. I want everyone to benefit. I'm doing fine. Someone who's mad at me is obviously having a bad day with themselves. But I feel like, it's too short. It's that we don't have enough time to worry about, not doing better. It's fun sometimes to talk some shit. But most of the time, I'm working at, creating more opportunities for myself, for my record label, for my artists, and artists around me as well. Like I do a lot of mentorship with artists that aren't on my record label because we don't have the capacity to sign everyone. Just a heads up, if anyone in here is thinking about starting a record label, don't. I think everyone gets this idea that you start a record label and you cash out. It's like, nah.
Printing money at that point, no?
Oh, mate. It's a big old money pit. But it's what I wanted to do. And that's been the cornerstone of my whole career. I want to do what I want to do. I want to do what I want to do all the time. I've never had a real job except this. I've never had a resume. My first job as a kid was, tuning guitars at a music shop in Shepparton because I wanted to be in the music industry that bad. I would tune guitars every Friday. I'd just hang out in their shop and they just got sick of me. Mr. Zirkus, good guy, started giving me, Briggsy, mate, I'll give you $50, you tune them. I was like, sick. And that was my first gig because that's all I ever wanted to do. And that has been the cornerstone of everything. Like, everything is secondary. And it's the reason I make rap music, the reason I stepped into doing this heavy, the reason I wrote a kid's book, the reason I did acting and wrote TV. It wasn't because I wanted to be a writer, it's because I just wanted to do it. And that's it.
We're running out of time fast here. Just want to make one more point on that anthem thing, right? These mob marching on the weekend are anti-immigration. So they're not even following the anthem to a T because it says that we've got boundless planes to share, right?
Apparently to share on their terms. And let's just keep that 100, you know what I mean? All this anti-immigration thing, all this keeping Australia the way it is for my kids, it's about white supremacy. Australia itself is a product of white supremacy. It's a commonwealth. It's a rollout of the colony, and it's right there in the corner of the flag. That's what it is. And you know what I mean? My band that I played with last night is full of immigrants. Craig on the bass guitar, he's Scottish. Lee's Italian, he's on guitar. Steve's from Darwin.
Darwin.
Close enough. But the reality is, man, I live and I breathe my values. And that's what culture is. Culture is values. I had a conversation with somebody once. I said, culture, it's not the pageantry. It's not dance and art. Dance and art and music are products of culture, of our values, of what we carry with us everywhere. That's what we take with us around the world. That's what gets passed down to us. The products of that, of dance and art, are so important, and they're so phenomenal to hold to our language. However, if it doesn't have the integrity and it's not culturally bound with our values, they become worthless. And this guy, he worked for a university. He said, yeah, but I'd argue that you can't have one without the other. And I said, well, that's the difference between having a boomerang from somebody who holds, cultural authority, and a boomerang from the airport. And he had nothing for me. 1-0.
All right, look, we are just about out of time, but what do you want the audience, these fellas here, to take away from today and from their time at Big Sound, I suppose?
I think, I'd love everyone to take away the idea that, that we should be driving the idea that blackfellas can be anything. They can be a multitude of multidisciplinary artists. It's not just one note. There's room for all kinds of artists from, all different cultures and backgrounds that we have within our own mob. And that's what we stand for at Bad Apples Music, And I just hope everybody can keep that in the back of their mind and don't be afraid to stand up and, show your values, carry it with you and be proud. And I feel like that is, what we live and breathe at Bad Apples Music, and it shows in our artists.
Thanks for the yarn, cuz.
Thank you, everybody.
Give it up for the Senator, Adam Briggs.
And I'll be at Brightside with Big Nota tomorrow at some point. I don't know when. I'm bad at this part. But I'll be there. You look it up. Do your own research.
Another round of applause for Briggs.